Hey guys, BJ with Very Basic Bible. I'm going to do a Very Basic Bible quick read. We're going to read through the beginning of the split of Israel into two nations, Israel and Judah, until Israel goes into exile. Israel will be split into two nations, Israel and Judah. And then eventually Israel will go into exile. We're going to read that. Okay, some of this will be long stories about prophets. Some of this will be quick and fast-paced stories about kings and political intrigue. We'll see. Some of it I will read long chunks without giving much commentary. Some of it we'll talk about it a little bit. 10 minutes at a time. Here we go. King Solomon loved many foreign women in addition to Pharaoh's daughters, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, and they must not intermarry with you, because they will turn your heart away to follow their gods. To these women, Solomon was deeply attached in love. Man, Solomon, come on. Solomon had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 who were concubines, and they turned his heart away. 1,000 wives. When Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away to follow other gods. He was not wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God as his father David had been. Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abhorrent idol of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight, and unlike his father David, he did not remain loyal to the Lord. As you notice, they repeat a lot. It's already told us Solomon turned aside. He didn't follow in the footsteps of David. And then it says it again here. Solomon turned aside. He didn't follow. The repetition is key. It's really emphasizing it. At that time, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abhorrent idol of Moab, and for Milcom, the abhorrent idol of Ammonites, on the hill across from Jerusalem. Man, the most holy place, Jerusalem. He did the same for all his foreign wives who were burning incense and offering sacrifices to their gods. The Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. God appeared to Solomon twice. And look, God hardly appears to people. Even in the Bible, when you get twice an appearance, man. He had commanded him about this so that Solomon would not follow other gods. But Solomon did not do what the Lord had commanded. Then the Lord said to Solomon, a third appearance. Since you have, or maybe it's through a prophet, might not be an appearance. We'll see. Since you have done this and did not keep my covenant and my statutes, which I commanded you, I will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. However, I will not do it during your lifetime for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out of your son's hand. Yet I will not tear the entire kingdom away from him. I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem that I chose. For the sake of David and for the sake of Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem's just a place, but God said, hey, I'm going to dwell there. You know, that's where the temple will be. That's where you'll go for all the three major feasts, right? That's where my king will sit. Okay. And David, man after God's own heart. So God's going to give it some time. God is patient. So the Lord raised up Hadad the Edomite as an enemy against Solomon. He was of the royal family in Edom. Earlier, when David was in Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, had gone to bury the dead and had struck down every male in Edom. For Joab and all Israel had remained there 6 months, until he had killed every male in Edom. Hadad fled to Egypt, along with some Edomites from his father's servants. At the time, Hadad was a small boy. Hadad and his men set out from Midian and went to Paran. They took with them men with them from Paran and went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house, ordered that he be given food, and gave him land. Pharaoh liked Hadad so much that he gave him a wife, the sister of his own wife, Queen Tahpenes. So this guy Hadad, he's living a good life. Okay. Remember, the Lord raised up Hadad the Edomite as an enemy against Solomon. We haven't seen that yet. We're talking about Hadad's backstory. Tahpenes' sister gave birth to Hadad's son, Gwenabath. Tahpenes herself weaned him in Pharaoh's palace, and Gwenabath lived there along with Pharaoh's sons. When Hadad heard in Egypt that David rested or died with his ancestors, and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me leave so I may go to my own country." Okay, maybe Hadad's gonna be raised up as an enemy against Solomon. But Pharaoh asked him, "What do you like here with me for you to want to go back to your own country?" "Nothing," he replied, "but please let me leave." God also raised up Rezon, son of Eliada, as an enemy against Solomon. Rezon had fled from his master, King Hadadezer of Zobah, and gathered men to himself. Rezon became leader of a raiding party when David killed the Zobites. He went to Damascus, lived there, and became king in Damascus. Rezon was Israel's enemy throughout Solomon's reign, adding to the trouble Hadad had caused. He reigned over Aram and loathed Israel. So because Solomon screws up, God's like, hey, raising these enemies up. These enemies are going to be against you. And now it gives us the backstory to the enemies. Why? I'm not exactly sure. Probably to introduce places such as Egypt, sure. But then we got Edom up above somewhere, right? Oh, Edomites. We got this place called Paran and Midian. Rezin, talked about Zobites. Damascus, he reigned over Aram, Rezin did. So later on, we'll see some of these same places. That'll help us. Okay. Now, Solomon's servant, another person, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, was an Ephraimite from Zereda. His widowed mother's name was Zeruiah. Jeroboam rebelled against Solomon, and this is the reason he rebelled against the king. Okay. Solomon had built the supporting terraces and repaired the opening in the wall of the city of his father David. Now the man Jeroboam was capable, and Solomon noticed the young man because he was getting things done. So he appointed Jeroboam over the entire labor force of the house of Joseph. During that time, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite met Jeroboam on the road as Jeroboam came out of Jerusalem. Now Ahijah had wrapped himself with a new cloak, and the two of them were alone in the open field. Nobody's around. So this is telling us how Jeroboam rebelled. So far, it's like Jeroboam's a good person. Oh, wait, here's this prophet that met Jeroboam. We'll see. How did he rebel? I don't know. Then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he had on, tore it into 12 pieces, and said to Jeroboam, that must have taken a while. Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord God of Israel says. I am about to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I will give you 10 tribes, but one tribe will remain his, Solomon's, for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city I chose out of all the tribes of Israel. Hey, that's right, up here. The Lord was angry with Solomon, which he commanded. Oh, right here, the Lord said to Solomon, since you have done this, and I will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Okay. However, I will not tear the entire kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son. Okay. So Jeroboam gets 10 tribes. Solomon gets one tribe. Of course, there's the Levites don't really count as a tribe. So that's where you get he tore his cloak into 12 pieces. Take 10 pieces. Well, the Levites don't count. So 12 tribes of Israel, you take the Levites away, 10 pieces. Okay. One tribe were made. Okay. 4. Israel has Judah, Solomon his house, for they have abandoned me. They have bowed down to the Ashtoreth. This is still Ahijah talking. The goddess of the Sidonians, to Chemosh, the god of Moab, and to Milcom, the god of the Ammonites. They have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my sight, and to carry out my statutes and my judgments, as his father David did. However, I will not take the whole kingdom from him, but will let him be a ruler all the days of his life for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose and who kept my commandments and my statutes. I will take 10 tribes of the kingdom from his son and give them to you. 10 tribes from Solomon's son, give them to Jeroboam. I will give 1 tribe to his son, so that my servant David will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem. There we go, guys. The city I chose for myself to put my name there. Okay, guys. We're going to meet in the next very basic Bible. Okay, the next very basic Bible. We're going to continue from this chapter. And remember, if you underneath the video, there will be show notes. In those show notes, there are verse by verse, long exegesis, detailed teaching over every verse. You got any questions? You're like, wait, I didn't understand that. I want to know more about that. Go to any of those teachings. Those guys are scholars. They know it all. Okay, guys, see you in the next very basic Bible.